Hey everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Into the Rift podcast, a Riftbound TCG podcast all about the meta, the decks, and most importantly, the game that we all love. I'm joined today, as always, by Joe Curley, deck breakdown extraordinaire, and my man, how have you been today?
Yeah, doing very well. Excited to jump into the latest developments with the Riftbound meta. We had big event over in Orlando this weekend where there was 3 different events, a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday, with lots of prize money on the line. And a lot of the players, Alex, participating at this event were, of course, at the regionals in Houston the week prior. So taking everything they've learned from that, running it up again. So I think that we're going to have some really interesting data to look at because the players that have been using these decks have been practicing and the meta is really starting to settle.
Yeah, and we've been working on a bit of a calendar to figure out what are we going to be covering upcoming? There are so many events upcoming as well. In January, you almost have an event every single weekend in China, which is pretty cool for that Spirit Forge launch. So there is so much to talk about moving forward. Couldn't be a better time to be a Riftbound player, I'm telling you. Now, with that being said, we got a bunch of stuff we're going to be talking about today. The first thing we're going to be talking about is what we've been playing. Joe and I actually tried to cook a little bit of something special for some skirmishes that we were doing. Talk about that Orlando meta. And most importantly, we're going to break down the top 4 from each of the days in Orlando. And there's a lot of surprises in there, as you might have seen on the thumbnail. There are some actual surprises in there. We're going to break it all down for you today, right now. We really appreciate that you're here. First, Joe, I want to just talk about, the skirmishes that have been happening over the last couple of weeks. Hopefully you guys have been having fun, finding success. And what I've noticed in my area is I've done a bunch of different skirmishes. I've actually done 3 so far. And I've noticed a lot of people have been traveling intercity, right? So you got people coming from other cities just to kind of get to LGSs and compete. They want those champion mats. They want to kind of compete at the highest levels available at the local level before you get to those regional style levels. And I've had a ton of fun, met a lot of people, and I gotta say there is a lot of excitement about Riftbound. And one of the things that I take away from that is that a lot of people, they come from Magic or Alter TCG or all these other TCGs. There's so many TCGs out there, but for some reason they are completely all in on Riftbound now because they love the gameplay, they love the collectability. It's a game that I feel like is capturing a massive audience, and it's only getting bigger.
Yeah, also like the League players as well, right? I mean, I think what's interesting is League of Legends is obviously it's a game, right? So you've got the gamers that are playing it. A lot of the other times with other IPs, whether it's Star Wars or Disney, if you're capturing those kinds of fans, they might lean more towards the casual side of things. Not always, of course. But with League of Legends being quite a hardcore game potentially with like a very competitive scene, I think a lot of people are maybe playing this as their first ever card game and getting into it. And of course, also Riot have Teamfight Tactics and Legends of Runeterra, which are both strategy-based games already. So this is actually their 3rd strategy game. So there's probably quite a lot of people from those games that are also picking up Riftbound.
And for me, the opposite's happening where, I've always really liked League of Legends' design and stuff like that. And I've loved MOBAs in the past. But now that I'm all in on Riftbound, I've actually installed TFT. I've installed League of Legends. And I actually messaged one of my friends, I'm like, hey, do you want to learn League of Legends with me? Because I'm all in on these heroes. I'm all in on the lore. And I actually would like to kind of start to learn more about where these heroes and where these cards originated from. The opposite's happening. I'm being pulled into their entire ecosystem because of Riftbound. And while I know that's not going to be as common as the people that are kind of moving the other way, coming from League of Legends or TFT into Riftbound, but for me, it's the opposite. And I can't believe how much there is to unpack. And I got to tell you, trying to learn League of Legends for the first time or TFT, these are very complex games, and I couldn't be happier.
I'm going to give TFT a try, I think. I installed Legends of Runeterra again, and I started watching Arcane. It's my 3rd time watching Arcane now, so I'm also feeling the Riftbound hype is pushing me in other directions as well. Because obviously there's no digital client, so I'm kind of itching. I'm like, maybe some Runeterra would be fun, since it's, you've got quite a lot of similar decks. It's always a fun game that I played a fair bit of, but not too much. It'll be interesting to see if games like Runeterra and TFT get a little boost from Riftbound players.
I would hope so. And I will mention as well as obviously like I come from a digital card gaming background, but despite that, I have to say it's been actually really fun getting out of the house, getting out of my basement, meeting people, playing with people, and 99.9% of the time, the people you interact with are incredibly positive, incredibly kind, and a lot of fun to be around. And every LGS that I've gone to has been a very positive experience, and I feel like Riftbound is getting so big that like even the LGSs, they're like trying to navigate the new systems, the way like cardio works and all those types of things, right? They are excited to have this much of an influx of new people to the TCG scene visiting their stores on a regular basis. It does come with one pain point though, which we'll talk about in our mailbag, and that is quite frankly a lack of product, which is I think a recurring theme. But before we get into that, Joe, why don't we talk about what we've been playing? Because you and I, we actually, we tried to cook a little bit. We both love Teemo. And you mentioned how you thought that seals in Teemo could potentially be a fascinating approach that is being underutilized. And you know, I was like, you know what? I got 2 seals. Why don't we try to brew? And so you and I, over the last couple of weeks, we had been kind of experimenting with some decks, moving some stuff around. And this is what I ended up playing in my skirmishes. This deck that, Joe heavily influenced is a Teemo deck. And I'll read the list out to allow everyone to kind of follow along if you're listening in the car. So we have the Teemo Scout, of course. We have 2 Seals of Insights, 3 Stacked Decks, 3 Stupefies, 3 Traveling Merchants, 2 Ride the Winds, 3 Ravenbloom Students, 2 Smoke Screens, 3 Fight or Flight, 2 Steady Deckhands, 3 Consult the Past, 3 Ember Monks, 2 Spirit Mothers, 2 Singularity, 2,000 Tail Watchers, 3 Mundos, and a single Time Warp. And then in the sideboard, we have 3 Gusts, 2 Scrap Heaps, 1 Ride the Wind, and 2 Tie Turners. Joe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so important to note that this was a hybrid sort of build between the two of us. Like, obviously, when you're trying to build decks, because this was me sort of giving you ideas, there's some cards that you really like, there's some cards that I really like, and this is sort of like an amalgamation of both the things we like. But there's also, like, as is the reality with pretty much everybody's decks, there's also some limitations in terms of what you actually own. Like, I think that you only have 2,000 Tailed Watchers, and I think you only have 2 Seal of Insights as well. I think we probably were going to go up to 3 copies of each if we could. But yeah, the Seals are very, very interesting. We see them catching on in some decks, but they haven't really caught on in Teemo just yet. But I am starting to see some really competitive Teemo builds start using the Singularities, the Sprite Mothers as well, which are like 2 very heavy power cost cards. Eventually, if you end up with loads of cards with blue power, like this deck already has Mundo, Thousand-Tailed Watcher, at what point are the Seals an option? And essentially the Seal is, a way of looking at it is, you have 1 card less in hand, but once you've used it twice, you're getting extra runes, like if you're already paying those power costs. So the biggest thing is that once you add Seals into your deck, you can start evaluating cards a little bit differently. Like suddenly Sprite Mothers are a lot more appealing when you already play blue Seals. So 2 blue Seals is on the lower end. You might want to go to 3. I think if you're only playing 1, you probably don't want to bother. I personally prefer 3, but they're quite hard to get your hands on, Alex. Like I don't actually have any blue Seals myself. But I think it's definitely cards that I would recommend people invest in, because I can imagine that the Seals just get better over time.
One of the things that I'll mention is that I'll tell you about the product I've opened, right? Over the couple months or whatever, I've probably opened a total of 15 packs, just buying packs and whatever. I've done 2 boxes and I've only bought a single card. And that was 1 Mundo to round out my 3rd. That's it. And everything else is I just cracked 2,000 Tail Watchers. And so when you look at a deck like this, could I go to 3? Maybe, because I got to tell you, Thousand Tail Watcher is an incredible card, and it's also one of the key cards you use to catch up on a board state that you've fallen behind on, which Teemo can absolutely struggle with, right? So you're absolutely right. You have 2 factors at play here. 1, deck design where you and I were discussing a few things, and like you're saying, why don't you cut this? Or, you got to play the Tide Turners. I'm like, I don't love Tide Turner, and I'm going to put him on the sideboard because I want him. I understand his value, but I really want to try out these Sprite Mothers and stuff like that. So there's two things happening where it's like sometimes I just don't have the card, which is in the case of the Thousand Tail Watcher. I don't have the third one. I don't have the third seal. But I'll actually combat that for a sec. I would suggest that a third seal might actually feel like a little too much because
Definitely possible.
yeah, because like when I was playing, even just having one seal felt like enough. When I had the second seal, it was still kind of cool because you could do some very interesting. You could like save your energy by float using the seal to actually hide things. Like there's some creative things that you can do with the actual seal itself. However, what I will say is that utilizing these seals and then putting cards in because you have the seals did produce some really interesting effects. Like for instance, against Master Yi, Singularity was incredible. I found, since I was playing Singularity more often with my Teemo, a number of cards that had 5 or 6 might that just immediately died to Singularity that your opponent was really relying on was like immense. Even Yasuo, Remorseful, right? Just dies, right? And so Singularity allowed me to flip board states very rapidly and then just use like, oh, I did that. You have no board now. And I'll just move my Traveling Merchants in and I'll search for my Mundo or whatever. And then one of the ways I won a game was I literally just Mundoed, rode the wind into a location. Then you time warp and boom, right? Really interesting stuff. I liked the way the deck played. And even against some of the more aggro matchups, something like the Sprite Mother, that little sprite, because it comes in readied, did allow me to be very aggro against like Annies and Kaisas. And I felt like it really helped me to propel my board state forward, even if that sprite was poofed before the beginning phase in the scoring kind of element. But it did allow you to play it even defensively at times and hold locations because that sprite still remains during your opponent's phase, right? So love the deck, but one thing I want to kind of throw your way, Joe, before I'll give you kind of the floor to talk about in general, was you were kind of pushing back on my use of Smokescreen. I was like, I really want Smokescreen in this deck. You're like, nah, I don't know. I don't like Smokescreen as much as I think you do. I'd like to hear your take on this because that was one of those ones where I think you would have taken it out, but I kind of like, well, I'm playing it. I'm going to put Smokescreen in. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on Smokescreen specifically.
I mean, I think it's good, especially when you're playing a blue seal already, right? It's one of those cards which, without the blue seal, like it might be difficult to justify it. We saw obviously Alan play 3 copies in Kaiser, and Kaiser almost is a built-in seal with her ability, right? She's paying the power cost for free. I think Smokescreen's great, and I think it's really just testament to the deck building of Riftbound. My favorite thing about the game is 40-card deck, 8-card sideboard, and a playset of 3. Things are extremely tight, even though it's the first set. Like if I look back at Disney Lorcana in set 1, 60-card deck, 4 copies to get a playset in, it was like you would struggle to fill your deck. You would just be, yeah, I'll just put this in. It's pretty bad. This game definitely doesn't have that, right? It's even when you're potentially missing a few cards in your collection, like the Seal of Insight or a Thousand-Tailed Watcher, it's not the end of the world in the slightest because there's other things that you can just replace them with, right? I think like the one card I wanted to mention, Alex, that since we built this that's really been catching my eye in Teemo is the Sprite Call. You mentioned Sprite Mother being able to spawn that 3 might token. I think Sprite Call is a really interesting way of doing it as well. It doesn't cost a power, but it kind of is a way of scoring some low commitment points in the mid game in a similar way to how the Annie decks are utilizing Sneaky Deckhand. I think the Teemo deck, I think the Sneaky Deckhand, as much as I like it, it's just not as good as it is in an Annie deck. And I think you probably need some... I think Sprite Mother and Sprite Call spawning lots of like 3 might sprites is like really good against Annie and dealing with those sneaky deckhands yourself.
Absolutely. I will say that 100%. The sneaky deckhand in Annie is significantly better. It certainly feels significantly better, especially since with Annie you get those 2 runes already and then you're able to essentially defend that sneaky deckhand's position very effectively. Can't really do that as well with Teemo, but I will say this, I had situations in the late game where like, again, I used Singularity, wiped their cards, and then I was able to use Sneaky Deckhand to just dive into a location, right? And just capture that.
So good against Dazzling Aurora decks as well, like where they're very slow, the Sneaky Deckhand comes in. Really, really useful, but I love the deck a lot.
Of course. And like Rebuke is missing from this deck, honestly. Like if I could go back, I think Rebuke has to be here considering the type of metas we're seeing. It's just such a great removal. It sets your opponent back so significantly. That's one thing I did regret not including. I should also state, I did not actually say what the battlefields were. They were Zon Warrens, the Arena's Greatest, and the Bandle Tree. And Bandle Tree, I'm kind of like, you know what? I think I'm done with it. I think it's a trap. I think it's a noob trap. Being able to hide 2 cards. Like, yes, maybe it's okay, but at the same time, it's like I almost never hide 2 cards. You know what I mean? So I think I might be looking to get rid of the Bandle Tree.
Yeah, I also like the Bandle Tree. I think what's interesting is for most decks, Bandle Tree is like very vanilla. Like there's no battlefield which has no text in the game, but this is, at times it feels like it's got no text. I think it's good. I think we see some very good players utilizing it. Like if you get an Ember Monk in there and hide 2 cards, like you can be in a really good spot. But the battlefield that I'm currently testing in Teemo is the one that gives ganking to units that are there. It's called like the Windswept Hillock, I believe. And units there get ganking. Really good with Dr. Mundo, for example. Also quite nice with the Ember Monk. Getting a 6-mite Ember Monk. Just suddenly have ganking, score some more points. It's kind of what you need to do with a Teemo deck, right? When you're building decks in this game, you have to think, okay, what's my win condition? And personally, with the seals, I quite like trying to win quite quickly, score lots of cheap points in the mid game, close out with a Watcher, and yeah, off you go.
Yeah, and one thing I should mention as well for people that might be new to Teemo, first of all, Teemo's fantastic, but if I'm opening with like Zon Warrens, I would put the scrap heaps in probably for this sneaky deckhand, and then when you're not playing Zon Warrens, you sideboard those scrap heaps out, put the sneaky deckhands back in. But overall, I do think that although this deck was really fun, it did have the opportunity to brick. I had one game against an Annie player who, on the draw, they did play their sneaky deckhand turn 1. And for me, my turn 1, after mulliganing 2 cards, I was holding Consult the Past, Thousand Tail Watcher, Mundo, and Time Warp. I was like, wow, this is bad. I'm like, this game, do I just sweep my cards up right now or what? You know what I mean? It's just, but thankfully, and this is where the Traveling Merchant comes to play, honestly. You top deck the Traveling Merchant, you play it down, you're a little behind, but then you start, like, you allow yourself to like, okay, I don't need this Time Warp, get rid of it, let's see what I get. It allows you to cycle through your deck, find the answers you need immediately. I know a lot of people focus on the Traveling Merchant as like the card that gets Mundo bigger. Honestly, Mundo's too big sometimes. I'm getting him over 20 power, or 20 might, I should say. Who cares? When he's that big, who actually cares at that point, right? He's going to win the locations. That's fine. But what I found with Traveling Merchant was so good is if I know I'm in a matchup where I need to find, my smoke screen, it allows me to find that smoke screen. You know what I mean? It allows me to dive through my deck. I don't want an extra steal. I'll get rid of this extra steal. Even a dead draw becomes a draw you can use with the Traveling Merchant. So at first I was one of those people that was like, I don't know if I like Merchant. But after playing Teemo almost extensively over the last couple of weeks, I got to say I'm a believer in the Traveling Merchant.
That's a good card. You can't really go wrong with it, can you? That's for sure. And with the stacked deck as well, even Stupefy, which is just replacing itself, like the deck does have a lot of consistency. Often just finding and hiding one Consult the Past helps you find the rest. But those green cards can be pretty nasty. If you get defied on your Consult the Past, it feels brutal.
Yeah, there's no question about that. What else feels brutal is having to pay 4 energy to play Consult the Past because you bricked your hand. That also feels brutal. I know from experience. But anyways, that was a little look at, a deck that we've been working on. And I think it's a fun way to start the podcast every once in a while. Like what we've been playing, what we've been brewing, what we've been cooking. It's a nice little discussion piece. But let's get to the meta of Orlando. 3 days of, I think the first one was like 290 something players, and we had 400 people Saturday. Good English there, Alex. A 400 person tournament on the Saturday, and Sunday was nearly as big. So we got a lot to break down. On the screen here, we have the top 8 from Friday. We have Saturday and Sunday as well. So we're going to read through the top 8 on Friday. Top 8 winning was Coccia. In second place, we had a Master Yi. Third was Coccia. Fourth place was Annie. And then in fifth, we have Coccia. Sixth, Master Yi. Finally, let's change it up a little bit here. We have a Set 7th, and finally an Annie at 8th. Talking about the Friday meta, Joe, what do you think? Any surprises here?
Well, it's good to see Set in the mix. And remember, this was sort of a Friday warm-up event in many ways. The Saturday, afterwards was the big one. So this was a 5K, but all of these players were also playing on Saturday. So if we're seeing any of these names on Saturday as well, you know that they had an insane weekend.
Oh, there's no question about it. And moving to the Saturday here, once again, we do have Miss Fortune taking the crown here. Miss Fortune coming in at number 1 on the Saturday large main event. Number 2, we have Coccia. Third place, we have another set. Fourth and fifth, same set player. Fourth and fifth, we have Annie. Sixth, Coccia. Seventh, a second Miss Fortune. And then rounding out the top 8 for Saturday was another Master Yi.
Yeah, so Miss Fortune wins this one. This was the big one. So we're looking at 3 tournaments, a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday. The Saturday was the big one, and it included a top 16 cut, which happened on Sunday. So the players that made top cut on Saturday were not able to compete at the Sunday event. That's important context. So this is really the big one, and Miss Fortune winning the whole thing is great to see, because we saw it in the top 8 in Houston, Annie, Yi, and Coccia, but Miss Fortune was the highest conversion rate in that tournament to top 64. And while it fell short there, I think it's great to see it doing so well now. So it looks as though we have 4 decks sort of at the top of the metagame. Set also sneaking in there is great to see as well. But Set, Teemo maybe still on the edges. But Miss Fortune, Coccia, Yi, and Annie seem to be the 4 main decks in the metagame right now.
There's no question about it. Like, obviously, when you look at any regional or any major competition, just in a nutshell, you might get a couple surprises here and there. But very clearly, Coccia has proven time and time again to be absolutely competitive to the top. Master Yi, the same. Annie, the same. These are the S-tier decks. To see Set, though, like, Set has had major victories, though. If anything, I feel like Set was a very big surprise that it underperformed in Houston, right? Like, Set had no top 64s, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Colin Coccia playing Set here, they finished in the top 8 on the Friday and also in the main event on Saturday/Sunday. They also had some very good results with Set just before Houston. So Houston is looking like a little bit of an anomaly, but it also was the biggest event that we've had.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if you're wondering about those decks, don't worry, we will get to those. But talking about the Sunday, once again, with the caveat that those that placed in the top kind of, was it the top 32?
Top 16.
Top 16 were not able to play on the Sunday. That's correct. We have first place. We have Coccia. Second place, Annie. Third place, Coccia. Another Miss Fortune coming in at 4th place. 5th and 6th were Master Yi's. 7th, an Annie. And finally, in 8th place, another Miss Fortune. So this was... Is this Miss Fortune's party to showcase just how good she is, or what?
It seems to be the case. I mean, Miss Fortune obviously playing Dazzling Aurora and being built like fully with that in mind. And then there's these Master Yi decks, which are maybe playing mid-range, maybe playing Dazzling Aurora, or maybe doing a bit of both. I always felt it was kind of weird to see the Master Yi Dazzling Aurora decks be so popular when Miss Fortune's an option. It's interesting to look at the differences, the advantages of each. But Miss Fortune is like an all-out Aurora deck very often, and is got a lot of really interesting tools going on. So I'm excited to look at the list. Also, Georgia at 3rd place of Coccia is the Chinese regional champion. They also got top 8 at Houston. So it's good to see players performing so consistently, because that tells us that there's a high skill ceiling in Riftbound.
Oh, no question about it. A lot of people say, oh, it's all RNG. You know, I actually have a friend that made the suggestion. I don't know if I've joked about this in the past, that the result of any card game is determined by the shuffle, assuming both players play perfectly every single time. And I'm like, I understand the theory of that, right? Like, you know, you shuffle your deck and assuming both players play perfectly, whoever shuffled the best wins, I guess, right? But at the same time, I'll tell you one thing, okay? I love this game. Every single time I lose, I sit there, you know, I congratulate my opponent, we chat for a bit, and I think to myself, I'm like, there was a win there somewhere. There was definitely a win in there somewhere, right? And it's fascinating because I've been one-tricking Teemo so much, I feel like you get the ins and the outs, you know what I mean? Like, I'm bouncing Thousand Tail Watchers, and people are like, oh, and then boom, and then I'm doing, like, you're making these very interesting plays, right? And I feel like you start to learn the ins and outs, and not just the matchups, but how you can utilize your cards in creative ways. And so as a result, I'm going to agree with you. I think there is a very high skill ceiling, and you out there, if you're like, you know what, I'm going to take Yasuo to the top, and I'm going to one-trick Yasuo until I get to the top. First of all, I think that deck's underrated. I actually really like it. I might brew with that going forward. And once I fall out of love with Teemo, which might be never, I might brew some Yasuo Remorseful. But I have to tell you, I think the skill ceiling's high. And yeah, this is a beautiful game if you like to kind of showcase what you're capable of in the TCG space. But Joe, it's the time we talk about the decks. We're going to go through each of the top 4 decks. Now, obviously, there's multiple Kaises and stuff like that, but we're going to go through each of the decks. Next week, I think what we're going to do is we're going to highlight some of like the outliers, because there was a Victor one that I kind of want to talk about, some of that. But we can't have a podcast here that's like 6 hours long. So let's go through the top 4 from each of the 3 days here. We're going to start with Kaisa coming in first place here from Andrew. I will read the deck list out here. You have Kaisa Survivor. You have 3 copies of the Pouty Poro, 3 Ravenbloom Students, 3 Watchful Sentries, 2 Lecturing. Is that Yordle? I think it is. That's probably actually there's 2 Kaisa Survivors. My apologies. You have 1 in the Champion Zone and 1 in the deck. 3 Dariuses, 3 Thousand Tail Watchers, 2 Cleaves, 3 Hextech Rays, 3 Retreats, 3 Stupefies, 3 Falling Stars, 3 Void Seekers, 1 Singularity, 2 Ecathian Reigns, and 1 Time Warp. In the sideboard, you had Get Excited, 2 copies of it, 2 Smoke Screens, 2, man, these names, Mjolnir's Thunder Song. I promise I'm going to figure these names out eventually, guys. Remember, I'm new to League, my bad. And then we have 2 Mega Mechs. Anyways, Joe, what do you think of this top placing list?
Yeah, it looks like, I mean, I would want to say it's standard, but we've got 2 Ecathian Reigns, 1 Singularity is like quite a lot of top end. I mean, I think it's just interesting to see how staple these Pouty Poros are proving to be. Very popular in Annie, very popular in Kaisa. Like that deflectability on a 2 energy card is so powerful. It might only have 2 might, but you know, you've got some of the other Poros which get +1 might when attacking or +1 when defending. You've got the Mystic Poro with Vision, but I think the Pouty Poro is the star of the show, really. This deflect, so valuable in the current metagame.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I'm finding it interesting that Time Warps are still making the decks. Like, I'm seeing some arguments about whether or not Time Warp is worth it. Obviously, it can be a win condition in and of itself near that end of the game. Cleave. 2 of Cleave. Now, obviously, there's no 3rd in the sideboard either. Now, Cleave is a bit of a, it's obviously very one-dimensional, but it allows you to put that very early aggression. What are your thoughts on 2 Cleaves versus 3?
I mean, I like the sound of 3 a lot more than I like the sound of 2. If you're wanting to fit extra things in, like Singularity as a one of the second Ecathian Reign, like you have to make the chop somewhere. I don't think Cleave would be the card I would cut personally. I think that this like 1 energy used to get 3 might is kind of what the meta's all about at the moment, which is like fast-paced aggression and contesting. So, I mean, I think it's fine, but I would probably want the 3rd copy there personally.
One thing I will say, first of all, I have to say at these skirmishes, played against a lot of Kaisas, so I'm getting a lot better at the matchup. I have to say that the Lecturing Yordle, the tank ability, might be slept on in Riftbound. I know it's a keyword that people kind of just float over, but when it comes into play, it comes into play. I feel like the tank ability can have some particular utility, and so I personally don't play Lecturing Yordles. I'm going to get these names. I'm going to figure them out eventually, I promise. I don't play it as often. I find I'm cutting them from my my blue decks. I don't play it in Teemo. I feel like it occupies a very similar space to the Traveling Merchant, so I'd prefer the Traveling Merchant as opposed to the Lecturing Yordle. But I'd be curious about your thoughts about the tank keyword and whether or not we're sleeping on it.
I think it's a good point. I mean, one of the big advantages of the Cleave is the combo with the Yordle as well, right? Being able to turn your Yordle into a 5 might tank is quite a bit bigger than 2. So particularly with combat tricks, I think tank is definitely a powerful keyword. We had something similar in Gwent called the Defender, and they were like very overstated cards often, not working in exactly the same way, but those cards were always extremely meta relevant as the game gets larger and you have more like wonky combo decks where like if you set up some like combination of cards you win. Tanks will be very helpful in that setting. And also in Disney Arcana there's a similar keyword, Bodyguard, which kind of like goes in and out of competitive play, but it's always a good keyword. It's just often that the cards that it's printed on aren't that good, but I think Yordle's like a really good example. It's like the main reason you play this is because it draws one, but the tank effect is definitely very powerful when used at the right moment and in the right hands.
Yep, so that's number 1 on the Friday. Taking us to the number 2 on the Friday, which is going to be Master Yi by Daniel. Master Yi by Daniel. This particular list, I will read it out to you. We do have the Master Yi champion from the Champion Zone. The Tasty Fey Folk, 3 copies of it. The Dead Bloom Predator, 3 copies. And I think that is currently the most expensive card in the game. And damn, is it a good card. 2 copies of the White Flame Protector, 2 Mountain Drakes. We have a Volley Bear, a single copy of a Volley Bear. 3 Zonia's Hourglasses, and man, that is such a wonderful card as well. 3 Dazzling Auroras, as expected in this Dazzling Aurora version of Master Yi. 3 Charms, 3 Defies, a single Sabotage, a single Challenge. We have Discipline, Mobilize. Discipline having 2 copies, Mobilize having 3. Rune Prism has 2 copies, 3 copies of Find Your Center, a single Wind Wall, 3 Catalyst of Aeons, and finally in the sideboard, 1 copy of Sabotage, 3 Clockwork Keepers, 3 Stalwart Poros, and a single copy of Wind Wall. Joe, what do you see in this deck?
Yeah, so this is one of those Master Yi decks we saw do really well last weekend as well in Houston, where the main deck is a Dazzling Aurora deck, but then they have the option to try and turn it into a Dazzling Aurora-less deck with the 2 drops on the sideboard. So when they queue into Annie, they're going to bring these 2 drops in. 2 drops aren't cards that you usually see in Dazzling Aurora decks. You just have loads of big units and lots of spells and gear. Like the cheapest unit in the main deck here costs 7, but then the sideboard has 6 of the 8 slots are just 2 energy units. So it's trying to be flexible and do both. We also saw some versions of Master Yi in Houston have a similar approach, but put the Dazzling Auroras on the sideboard and have the main deck sort of a normal deck. So it's really interesting to see these decks develop and still get good results.
There's no question. You know what? This is not the last time we're going to be talking about Dazzling Aurora, which is almost another conversation altogether. You know what? I'm going to have a conversation now. Joe, I'm going to throw it at you. I don't know if I love the Dazzling Aurora gameplay. It feels particularly uninteractive.
Yeah, it's kind of brutal, but I think the fact that sideboards exist in this game is very important because, yeah, against Aurora you can sideboard in gear removal, you can sideboard in cards like Sneaky Deckhand to be a bit more aggressive. I think it's like, I do agree with you, it's not the most fun thing to lose against, but it's also very satisfying to beat. And it is just sort of like a pillar of the meta that you know exists, and you know that if you're playing a deck, you're going to have a strategy to beat Aurora. And I actually think I quite like it, like adding gear removal to the sideboard, making sure your main deck is quick enough to win that game 1. It's growing on me. It's a shame it's so expensive, I think, to be honest, right? That's part of the problem. It's like, not only is the card itself expensive, but of course the Predators and everything else that comes with it means that these decks are, no matter really what legend you go for, it's always going to be an expensive deck.
Yeah, and with locations like Aspirant's Climb and the Obelisk of Power, these just feed directly into the game plan, which is ideally what you want with battlefields. But this deck, once it gets moving, is so incredibly effective. And when that Dazzling Aurora comes down, if you do not have an answer, like, again, those rebukes and like those types of things, like you just get clowned on. And the Dead Bloom Predator, it's basically just coming in ready because for them, right, they're not going to have a board state. They bring it out, they slam it right. It's basically coming right onto the opposing battlefield, and it often just trades. It is so good. So once these guys get going, they definitely do have an opportunity to take the game over, and that is essentially the Dazzling Aurora game plan. That's exactly what they want to do. We have the 3rd place Coccia by Randy TCG. Did you see anything different here that you want to kind of point out? They do have 3 Noxus Hopefuls here, which was not in the prior deck.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I mean, Noxus Hopeful to me is like a very fascinating card because I expected Annie to be maxing out on this, but all the Annie lists we're seeing are not playing any copies. Most Coccia decks are still playing this card. It's very, very strong when you can get it down. Only 2 Darius is also a bit of a surprise, Alex. I'm not sure if there's maybe a 3rd one on the sideboard. We've seen Darius just be so strong. There is no Darius on the sideboard, but there is a 2nd copy of Coccia, which is also interesting because there's some debate in terms of how many copies of Kaiser Survivor are optimal in these Kaiser decks. With the fact that you have it as your chosen champion, you can always call it in when you need it. So often we don't see like a second copy. We certainly very rarely see 3 copies of this card in the Kaiser deck. I personally think I would play just 1 copy as the chosen champion, because it's just always there and available, and try and use the other slot elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm debating internally right now. Like, do I read out the deck list, or am I just going to annoy everyone? It's pretty much a Kai'Sa deck list. I think it might be a good idea just to kind of focus on some of the more unique things. I will say 3 copies of Cathian Rain, which is kind of unique there. A 2nd copy of Time Warp. Now, what I'll note, though, in the sideboard, we just talked about Dowsing Aurora. And in the sideboard, believe it or not, we do have a Thermo Beam, which is going to destroy all gear. Is that, you believe, it must be directly answering that meta, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the weaknesses of Kaiser is in red-blue, you don't have any gear removal available apart from this card. So 5 energy, 2 power, kill all gear, extremely slow and necessary, basically, right? Like, it's there for a reason. We do see most Kaiser players going with 2. I even see some using 3 on their sideboard.
Yeah. Now, just going to throw it out there because I'm of the thought process that 2 Time Warps is probably greedy. Why do you think they would go with a 2nd?
Yeah, well, it is greedy, absolutely, but this deck is also built in a greedy manner. There's 3 Acarthian Rain, 2 Time Warp, 3 copies of Retreat, which is this 1 energy spell to return a friendly unit to its owner's hand, and then the owner channels 1 Rune Exhausted. So if you can use Retreat on one of your own cards, it is giving you extra runes, you ramp up. This is a very greedy build aimed at winning mirrors with 3 copies of Watchful Sentry, which draws a card when it dies, 3 copies of the Lecturing Yordle, which draws when you play it. It's really just looking to win the long battles against other Kaiser decks, and probably it's going to struggle against Annie as a result.
Awesome. Going to 4th place, talking about Annie. Annie's up in 4th place here. This is an Annie by Cynthia, and it is running... We have Annie the Stubborn, a single copy there. 3 Pouty Poros, 3 Traveling Merchants, 3 Vies. We have 3 Sneaky Deckhands, 3 copies of Kai'Sa Survivor, 3 Dariuses, 3 Scrap Heaps, 3 Cleaves, a single Gust, 3 Stacked Decks, 2 Fight or Flights, 3 copies of Flash, 1 Rebuke. We have 3 Ride the Winds, and 2 Void Seekers. In the sideboard, we have 2 Gusts, a single Fight or Flight, 2 Rebukes, 1 Void Seeker. And finally, I was going to mention this. I feel like I've not been seeing as much Draven lately. We'd have 2 copies of Draven, which does make perfect sense in an Annie deck.
Yeah, nice sideboard option, I think, against Kai'Sa in particular. Like, Kai'Sa can struggle to deal with a unit around that size. And we spoke, didn't we, about the Kai'Sa Survivor in the Kai'Sa decks. Only usually using 1 or 2 copies because it can be your chosen champion. In this deck, all 3 copies is seeming extremely typical, but of course you don't have it as your chosen champion. And part of the reason to play 3 is that you just want to draw it at the right moment. You need that consistency. So that's one of the advantages of having Kai'Sa as your chosen champion in a Kai'Sa deck. You always have it available when you need it, so you don't need to play as many. Whereas this deck, because it's not a champion that you can choose, there's 3 copies to just try and draw it as often as you possibly can.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You also have the 3 Dariuses, which honestly, I think Darius might be... We talked about Stacked Deck being one of the best cards in the game. Darius doesn't, I think, reach quite that level, but by gosh, is Darius incredible. Like, this is such a good card. And you do have 3 in here as well. Overall, I really do like Annie. I think its legend ability is... it's probably... Is it the best? Do you think it's the best in the game?
I think
close,
Annie
right?
has the best legend ability? I would say no. I would say it's close.
Yeah, that's a discussion for another pod.
Maybe I would probably give it to Kai'Sa. I would probably give it to Kai'Sa.
You think so? I actually... Okay,
the 1 power cost. I don't know. That's a good question. I like. Sounds like a good podcast episode, right?
Sounds like a great podcast episode. We'll have to cover that one day. Let's move on to Saturday, because that was all Friday. Now, Saturday is where the spice gets even spicier. Ali coming in with a misfortune first place finish at the Saturday 10K here. And wow, this was something that I don't think a lot of people quite expected. And so I'm going to go through this list here. This is a Dazzling Aurora deck. There are 3 copies of it. We do have Misfortune, the captain, as the chosen champion. We have 3 Mind Splitters. I love that card, by the way. If I can fit that in blue-purple more often, I definitely would. Maybe I should be. Mind Splitter is such a beauty.
Maybe.
Yeah, 3 Dead Bloom Predators. 1 Soul Gorger. That is a greedy card you don't see very often. A single Mountain Drake. 1 Volley Bear. 3 Dazzling Auroras, as mentioned. 2 Bullet Times. 3 Gusts. 2 Sabotages. 3 Stacked Decks. A single copy of Confront. We have 3 Fight or Flights, 3 Mobilize, 3 Ride the Winds. We have 2 Invert Timelines, 3 Catalyst of Aeons, and 2 Primal Strengths. That's the main deck. In the sideboard, we have, just in case you need a 3rd copy of Sabotage, you do have it in the sideboard, 2 Rebukes, 2 Fading Memories, another copy of Primal Strength, and 2 Possessions. I'll give you the floor, Joe. There's so many questions I have about this particular shell, but I'll let you kind of break it down.
Yeah, so Dazzling Aurora, Misfortune, it's the deck which made me realize Volley Bear is not very good. I was playing Volley Bear quite a long time ago. I was like, okay, this is nice. Got my Dazzling Aurora. And then I played against a Misfortune Dazzling Aurora player for the first time, and they started using a Mind Splitter to discard my Dazzling Aurora and these other little tricks that they can do. It is an extremely greedy deck, as Dazzling Aurora often is. The Master Yi versions, you get like that 1 additional ramp card, the 3-cost ramp card that channels a Rune Exhausted and draws a card. So you get a little bit more consistency with green, but what you get with purple is you also get consistency in the form of stack deck. That's going to help you, of course, find your Dazzling Aura, maybe helps you find your ramp. But I think particularly that Mind Splitter top end alongside the Sabotage. So there's 3 Mind Splitters, 2 Sabotage, and of course a 3rd you mentioned on the sideboard. So this is the color pairing which really enables like a discard style deck. And Ali, who won this event, was also in the top 64 in Houston. And when I was watching them play on the feature matches in Houston, whenever they used a Mind Splitter, they were writing notes. They were writing down every single card in their opponent's hand, full information. And the Misfortune Legend ability in this one, giving a unit ganking, it sounds like the kind of legend that you would want in an aggro deck to score points. But imagine you Dead Bloom Predator off your Dazzling Aurora, clear a battlefield, hold that battlefield, ready everything up. Your opponent just moves everything into one battlefield to try and hold. If they hold that battlefield, they win. And suddenly you just, for 0 cost, give your Dead Bloom Predator ganking and you just move it on into that other battlefield to stay alive. That's what you have to do as an Aurora deck, right? It's about stopping your opponent getting to 8. You're going to get there eventually the longer the game goes on. So the Misfortune ganking ability is so good once you've got control of one battlefield with a big unit.
This is one of the first cases of like a legitimate disruption deck, right? You're right to identify the amount of discard available. Like legitimate you disrupting your opponent's hand in this particular deck. But that sometimes comes at odds with Invert Timelines, which is not a card you see very often, right? Because each player will discard the hand, draw 4. But naturally, that's a situation where, let's say Annie or even a Teemo is cycling so many cards, getting their hand nice and big. Like Annie's can definitely do that with, especially with their Kaisas. Does Invert Timelines just kind of reset their hand and then allow you to, on the next couple turns, start poking away at it, attacking it with the Mind Splitters, attacking it with the Sabotages? I'm interested in your take on Invert Timelines and how it can be used effectively in these types of decks.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I feel I'm cautious that I've made a few Lorcana comparisons already, but that's the main trading card game I'm playing. In Disney Lorcana, there's a whole new world, which was a very similar effect, and it was one of the best cards in the game for a long time before it was rotated out. The difference in Lorcana is that's a song card, which basically means that you could pay the cost for free at some point. So a big disadvantage that Invert Timelines has is while it's an extremely powerful effect, spending 3 energy and a power, that's like taking a lot of your resources up, like you're using a lot of your turn to do this. But when you know the cards that are in your opponent's hand already, right? A well-timed Invert Timelines, it's not even necessarily about card draw. It's more about disrupting your opponent's hand. If they've got 7 cards in hand, which is going to be quite typical for a lot of decks, and you play Invert Timelines, they suddenly have 3 cards less in hand, right? And then you could play a discard card off the top of that, right? Like imagine there are 8 cards in hand, you play Invert Timelines, you draw into a Sabotage or a Mind Splitter, you play that. suddenly your opponent's like lost half their hand size in a single turn. And of course, there's also some consistency there. It can find you your Dazzling Aurora. Maybe you need like a Ride the Wind or a Fight or Flight in a pinch in the late game. So it's a very, very fascinating card. There's no doubt about it. Very difficult to use effectively, though. Very, very difficult to use effectively.
Yeah, highly situational, no question. But that's the number one misfortune. And you know what? We're going to see other misfortunes as well. Another Kaisa, this one from Jonathan, finishing second on the Saturday. I will say that this has more or less it's a very similar design to the first place from the prior day here. This one does feature Falling Star. Was there Falling Star in the first one? I don't quite remember. Yeah, there was. Yeah, actually almost nearly identical, to be honest with you. Anything you want to add?
Nah, we see enough Kaiser.
All right, moving on. Let's talk about something more interesting than just Kaisa again. We have Set finally coming in third place on Saturday. We have Set, and as you mentioned prior, Colin, who is piloting the Set here, has done a lot of good work with Set, and it was kind of like one of those surprise misses from Houston, but it's showcasing itself here in third place on the Saturday. And let's actually go through the deck here. We have obviously the chosen champion as Set the Brawler, and there is one additional copy of it within the deck as well. We have 3 copies of Kithria of Cloudfield, 1 single copy of Daring Poro, 3 Pit Rookies, 3 First Mates, 3 Fioras, 2 Kinku Monks, 3 Kianas. We have 1 single Set the Kingpin. We have 3 Arena Bars. We have 3 Sabotages, 3 Showstoppers, 2 copies of Challenge, 2 Hidden Blades, 3 Call to Glories, and 3 Primal Strengths. In the sideboard, we have 2 copies of Unyielding Spirit. There's the other 2 Daring Poros. We have 1 Facebreaker, 1 Hidden Blade, and 2 Vengeances. And I should add that the Daring Poros, there were 2 copies in the sideboard. I just got excited because I was like, where's those other copies of the Daring Poro? I love Poros. I think they're one of the most, I'm not going to say they're the best cards in the game, but they're definitely the most fun designed ones, right? I mean, it plays a huge role in red, to be honest with you. I think those are fantastic cards to deflect. But anyways, Joe, what do you think of this third place finish from Set?
Yeah, it's great to see. And I think let's start with the 2 drops, because I think the 2 drops when deck building is very, very fascinating when you start like breaking down maths, like how often are you going to hit a 2 drop on your first turn? And that's going to depend, basically, the more you play, the more likely you are. 7 is not a lot, but that's a conscious decision. And that's also why we're seeing 2 Poros in the sideboard as well. I think that for a deck like this, the thing I like most is seeing those 2 additional Poros in the sideboard. I think that's something quite new that I don't think I've seen that before. Because what that means is in game 1, you only have 7 2-drops, sure. But if you're up against like Annie or maybe up against Dazzling Aurora, when you need to be a little bit quicker, having a bit more consistency and being able to bring in a bit more consistency from your sideboard, I think is valuable. And a big reason that Set doesn't want to play too many 2-drops is only on 7 in the main deck, is because the deck doesn't have that much card draw. And when you don't have that much card draw, you're going to be top decking somewhat often. So of course, the more 2-drops you play, okay, it makes your curve more consistent, but it also makes your top decks worse. And I think that's a big reason that 7 is like a very specific number that this player has settled on. So I think that's really fascinating to see.
It definitely is. And in the sideboard, we do have 2 copies of Vengeance. Is that purely for, like, what are we targeting there? Are we targeting the Dazzling Aurora style cards, or are we targeting, like, Vise? Like, what do you think the Vengeance is being
Dr.
kind
Mundo.
of for? Mundo, yeah.
Yeah, some of those big hitters in the late game. I think Dr. Mundo especially would be a good target for this.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And obviously Showstopper, what an unbelievable signature spell. That can really set up some fantastic trades. So with regards to this particular deck, I'm wondering, Sabotage. Do you think that the Sabotage, you're purely going after the Dazzling Auroras? Like, what are you trying to target with the Sabotage here?
Well, Sabotage is also information, right? Like, even if you miss on the Sabotage, of course, that is very bad. You lost a card, they got nothing. But if you discard the card, you're paying 1 energy, 1 power to get all of that information as well. And again, because Set isn't a deck which has an abundance of card draw, you are kind of wanting a card like Sabotage, which goes 1 for 1. It works pretty well in this deck. I think it's just a really strong card. But this deck does have a lot of like power cost issues, so you need to use it very, very carefully. You can run out of power really quickly. Call to Glory as well, Alex. Such a card that people have to be aware of in this deck because it costs 3 energy as a reaction, but as you play this, you may spend a buff as an additional cost, and if you do, ignore the spell's cost. So you can give +3 might to something with no energy open. Like a lot of the time you look at your opponent in Riftbound and like, oh, you're tapped out, nice, I'm free to do whatever I want. But if you're playing against Set and they have a buff on the field, you need to be very wary of Call to Glory.
Yeah, no question. And I guess the next question I want to ask is, with Set, what do you think separates Set from Lee Sin? Because like obviously both are working with buffs in unique ways. What do you think makes it so that Set kind of is carrying that like the buff synergy to the highest levels, whereas Lee Sin seems to be struggling?
Well, Lee Sin has Master Yi sort of vying for its space in the same color combination. And Set also has a Proving Grounds legend with the same color combination, but it's Garen. So that's one thing, right? Set's got Garen, not much competition. But I think the true answer is that Set's just making better use of the buffs. Lee Sin is giving buffs, but there's not actually that many cards in the game which have massive payoff to have a buff. The biggest buff payoff is actually in yellow, which you can't play in Lee Sin, which is this Call to Glory card. And the other, well, possibly the bigger buff payoff is the Set Legend. Using that buff to recall a unit is so powerful. So Lee Sin can give more buffs, sure, but it doesn't have big buff payoff. Whereas Set struggles to give buffs a little bit more, but the buff payoff is much higher. That's why we see 3 copies of Arena Bar in this deck. You would never play that in a Lee Sin deck, buff an exhausted friendly unit once a turn. Lee Sin doesn't need a card like that, right? So you kind of have Arena Bar like built in, but the payoff is just much better for Set.
Absolutely. Well, Set coming in third. It's about damn time. Top 4 on Saturday, Taylor's Annie. Just quickly going through here. This does have the Legion rear guard in it, one-ofs, which is, kind of fascinating. But other than that, it's relatively stock. They are running the single rebuke right in the main deck here. Sideboard, the usuals. 2 Dravens once again in the sideboard. I'm curious, are people sideboarding Draven out and just putting him in for the Arena's greatest games? Is that kind of the plan here? Like, I feel like if I was playing Annie, I'd want Draven in. What are you thinking?
Yeah, good question. I think it's probably matchup specific. I think Arena's greatest is a good observation. There's some synergy there, no doubt. But I think it's probably also just like for Kaiser. I can just imagine like if I'm at 6 points and I've got a 9 Might Draven, I think against Kaiser that makes such a difference. But it's also going to be something that's probably too slow in a mirror matchup, for example. It's probably why it's finding its way on the sideboard and not the main deck.
Yeah, fair enough. But with regards to Annie, you are seeing this doing very well. And as I said before, those red pouty poros, man, the deflect adds up. Like I feel like they can be very challenging to deal with. And Annie's game plan is get points fast and furious. And those pouty poros, it makes it very difficult to gust them out or to deal with them. You just can't. Like they just sit there, or you got to pay a heavy price to get rid of them, which I think is obviously a core part of that game plan.
Yeah, this particular deck list, Alex, it's only really done one thing, which is removed a Pouty Poro for a Legion Rearguard. And I quite like the Legion Rearguard, but I cannot get behind cutting a Pouty Poro. I think this card is so good. I'm so high up on this card.
Yeah, so why, like the Rearguard, obviously you can accelerate. Is that just for additional pressure on the board? So you could remove something and just throw it in there fast, get it that extra point?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of merit to having like a one-of in your deck, right? In a 40-card deck, 39 with the Chosen Champion, you're going to see that one-of pretty often. And it's something that Frank Carsten does a lot, who is a Magic the Gathering Hall of Famer and a very data-driven deck builder. He's been playing lots of Disney Lorcana and having lots of success. And one thing that he does in a lot of his decks is he'll play lots of one-ofs. So it's definitely something that's interesting. We saw George in his Kaiser deck also playing this Legion Rearguard as a one-off. So the idea is rather than just playing 3 Poros, you have a bit more flexibility. I would argue that the value of the Pouty Poro outweighs that little bit of extra utility, particularly in an Annie deck. But I think the Legion Rearguard is still a very interesting card. I just would like to see the full set of Party Power.
And I think that you're baiting the comments by bringing up Lorcana again, because that's like what, times 7, I think. That's how you know Joe's a professional content creator, baiting you guys in the comments. That's going to take us to the Sunday, and once again, we do have first place. We do have Coccia. This particular deck it's a Coccia deck. It's a Coccia deck. I don't know. It does have 3 smoke screens, 3 copies of smoke screens in there, and 3 copies of thermal beam as well. The other one had 2 copies in the sideboard, right? And this one has 3 copies in the sideboard, so getting a little more fast and furious with the Dazzling Auroras.
So this is actually almost identical, if not identical, to Alan's top 8 Coccia list. This is the one that I was recommending last week that I liked the look of. So it's got 1 Time Warp in the main deck, which I think Alan might have, but a Carthian Reigns on the sideboard, that triple smoke screen, the sideboard of Yordle as well, Thermobeam. So like the main deck, he's got the Noxus Hopeful, he's got all the Poros, he's got all the Cleaves, he's got all the Hex, just 1 Coccia. That 3 smoke screen, like this is basically the Annie Destroyer version of Coccia. This is the one that's really able to go toe-to-toe with Annie the most.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Very aggressive. And that's going to be taking us to Annie, coming in at second place on the Sunday. And I feel like we're saying, guess what, guys? It's an Annie deck. It's an Annie deck. I don't see anything. I mean, I guess this has Vayne in it, 2 copies in the sideboard, 1 Fading Memories. Fading Memories is an interesting card. But outside of that, yeah, this is, it is 3 copies of Coccia Survivor, but we saw that prior as well. I still find it fascinating. Like, obviously, Flash doing really well for Annie to reset their board state, Fight or Flight and Flash. 3 copies of each. You almost feel like they're kind of stepping on each other's toes, but apparently not.
Yeah, I mean, I love Fight or Flight. So when I saw people like cutting it for Flash, I was like, really? But maybe Flash is just that good and Fight or Flight is just that good that you just play the full play set of both. But for me, I really like actually seeing Coccia manage to take down Annie in the final here, because when I looked at that Coccia list, it's the one I recommended last week because it looks like it's a deck which can deal with Annie really well. Yordle in the sideboard. And yeah, sure enough, Annie lost in the final to that Coccia deck. So I think that's a pretty good sign for that Coccia deck. Remember, that's the Coccia deck that won this one. That is the Coccia deck which lost top 8 in Houston for missing Arena's greatest point. Like, it all could have been so different. Annie obviously is the talk of the town, but that particular Coccia list that won the Sunday event had another great showing here. So that's good to see.
And then third place on Sunday would have been Coccia once again. And once again, it's a Coccia deck. This one is running Singularity, which I think we've seen before as well. 2 copies of Cathian Rain. Sideboard, the 2 Mega Mechs. Pretty much, I mean, the decks, I'm not trying to just be lazy, not read everything out. They're very similar now. Like, the refinement has occurred, and we are seeing some minor differences here and there. Joe, I don't know if there's anything you want to call out specifically.
Yeah, well, this is George. So George finished top 8 also last week. He was the other Coccia player. And you sort of got those 2 approaches. You have the one that won this tournament, which is being a little bit quicker, aiming at beating Annie. And then this one's slower, going to be better in mirrors. I personally think that the better approach would be to be better into Annie and try and win game 1 versus Annie.
And why are some players choosing to cut the Cathian Rain?
That's a good question. Probably because Annie's just a bit too quick for it. The Pouty Poros in particular. Having to play those deflect costs, it's actually very difficult to get to a Carthian Rain against Annie. It can happen, but those Pouty Poros in particular put in a lot of work. And I think also Annie players have built their decks in a way which makes the Carthian Rain worse. With cards like Flight, they just don't overcommit into the Carthian Rain. And that's why we're seeing people move away from it, because Annie's just a bit too quick.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And Hextech Ray, what a fantastic card, being able to kind of, often deny points as opponents try to, in those early games, slide cards into given battlefields. Now, that's going to take us to our final deck we'll be discussing today, and that is the top 4 Misfortune. Don't worry, guys. It's not an Annie deck. It's not a Coccia deck. It's Misfortune. We have discussed Misfortune, but this one here is, once again, surprisingly similar to the other one. It is a Dazzling Aurora base shell. You do have the 3 Mind Splitters, the 3 Dead Bloom Predators. You have the
only 2 Dead Bloom.
Oh, 2.
I
Sorry.
can't believe it either.
Yeah, only 2. I was just assuming 3. Maybe
Yeah.
like me, they don't have the third because they don't want to spend $100 on it, right?
What
Like
I was
that's
gonna say.
maybe that's it. But anyways, was there anything you wanted to shout out here? Oh, this is running 3 copies of Challenge. I don't think the other one was. I think the other one was only running a single copy of Challenge, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly. I don't know. I love Challenge. I just love Challenge. I think it's such a great card.
Yeah, I like Challenge 2 a lot. I think like 2 Deblooms is very surprising. Is there a third on the sideboard? I'm so curious. There isn't.
No.
It's gotta be a budget thing, right? It's probably not, but it's an extremely outrageous thing to only play 2 Deblooms. Like a lot of the time when you play Aurora, you're going to be like, right, my only out here is hitting a Debloom Predator.
Yeah, 100%.
Off Aurora. Bullet Time is something we didn't cover too much with the other Misfortune deck, but it's really solid. As a signature spell, you can pay any amount of power to deal that much damage to all enemy units at a battlefield. So like if you just need to clear 1 battlefield and you win the game, you could spend 12 power, recycle all 12 runes and deal 12 damage to everything at a single battlefield. If it's going to win you the game, who cares? You don't need any more runes, right? So it's a very flexible card. You could, of course, just spend like 1 power if you need just 1 damage, 3 if you need 3, or if you just want to go full, try and stay in the game. It's like a really good emergency button in a pinch.
Yeah, no question about it. But a Misfortune rounding out the top 4 on the Sunday. And Joe, that's going to take us to our mailbag segment. And we have one primary thing that the comments were interested in talking about. Coming in from Undead Eggmeister, they said, apparently the cards are getting insane to purchase right now. They're either sold out or they're sky high priced. And then Shakuro Kappa, I think is the way you would say your name. I said your name wrong, but it's okay. That's all we do today, apparently. I just say names wrong. We never doubted Riot's ability to host events, just their ability to get us cards. And I think that these comments are ringing true. Like when I go to locals, there is a lot of frustration with access to the product. It's either prohibitively expensive. Like I'm talking, like if I want to get a box right now, if they're in stock, I can't get it for less than $300. You know what I mean? Like that is a lot of money for a box of cardboard. Don't get me wrong. I love the cardboard in there. I want to crack those packs. But Joe, the restocks, they've been coming, but the stock is not exactly like flooding the market. We have a massive stock issue. And I'm starting to wonder if it's actually preventing people from getting into the game because, first of all, you have a price ceiling. Some of these decks, like when you talk about the Deadbloom Predators, like these decks are going to be hundreds of dollars, right? Like $500-$600 to get all the cards you need. Do you think that we have to solve the supply issue? Like, do you think it perhaps is creating a barrier to entry that shouldn't exist?
Yeah, I mean, it's something, before Riftbound came out, there was a lot of murmurs that the stock was going to be very short. And it's so interesting that it seems to be happening for many card games. Looking at Gundam recently, Disney Lorcana had similar issues with their first set or 2. It's a weird one because it's obviously like Riot want to get the game into as many people's hands as possible. But there's also like a very small part of me, and this is not necessarily going to be a popular opinion, but the fact that it's so hard to get your hands on, I also feel like is slightly contributing to the hype of the game, because then when you do get your hands on packs, it feels that much more exciting to open it. Like me and my buddy, we like crossed 40 minutes in Berlin to go to like a store we'd never been to because we heard there was some Riftbound there. So it's a shame that there isn't packs, but when you do get your packs, they're all the sweeter. I think ultimately, like, we want as much product as possible. And we do know that Riot are going to reprint stuff. So hopefully people can just sit tight and we get more stock in the new year as quickly as possible. I'm sure that Riot is going to be on it and throwing money at the problem at this point, right? But it's definitely a bummer that there's not much. I want more as well. And I think that a lot of the good decks are expensive, which also sort of compounds that, right?
Yeah, no, most certainly. And something else worth mentioning is that, with Spirit Forge coming out, obviously they're going to be printing Spirit Forge. So I wonder how that affects the availability of the first product. There's a good chance that, when Spirit Forge comes out, that there'll be less people seeking the Origin set. So maybe on that window where both are kind of available, you might be able to pick it up a little more commonly. I do hope they ship more Spirit Forge as opposed to the Origin set. I do hope that they do provide some more product, keep the prices down, get people into the game, because I think that would be very beneficial to the scene as a whole. Because obviously there's a ton of interest in this game. I guess the other concern, I did have someone voice this to me as well, was they kind of liked the idea that product was limited because it kept their hits valuable, right? They're like, well, I got these hits, I got this, these showcase cards, and they're staying up in price. Well, it's like, yeah, that's cool and everything, but at the same time, people want to build competitive decks, and they kind of need those Thousand Tail Watchers. I'm talking from experience here. I kind of would like to pay less than, I think, $60 US for it, is when I checked most recently. I think it's gone down a little bit, actually. But yeah, like, it would be nice to get our hands on more product. And by the way, cracking packs, doesn't matter how your day's going. It's always going to make you feel a little bit better. But anyways, Joe, anything else to close out the pod today?
No, I think like if you are struggling with Riftbound products, like don't be afraid to try some of the budget decks we covered on the first episode, like the Yasuo deck. Got top 64 recently at Houston, and it is really, really cheap. So you can still play this game on a budget. Okay, you're going to have to be more selective. You're going to have to maybe play a little bit better, but I think it's part of the fun experience for me is trying to make what you have work, and I think that you shouldn't be too afraid to try and do it. Even if you're not going to have the best deck at your locals, actually a lot of the time playing bad decks makes you a better player in the long run.
Absolutely, no question about it. Guys, thank you so much for watching today. We appreciate every one of you. If you have something that you'd like for us to discuss for the mailbag, leave us a comment down below, and perhaps we'll just might pull it and talk about it. See you on that next one.